Hello and welcome to Mabina TV. This is home of Compassionate Conservatism, where I advocate for a fine balance, a sweet spot between individual creative genius excellence as afforded by capitalism and society excellence as afforded by equality of opportunity. So in essence, you are calling for capitalism with a human first, that is capitalism with a human first. So for now, this is Mabila TV, and for now I'll start within Africa perspective. So in Africa perspective, does Liberia, there has been an opposition win in Liberia. So what does it mean for an opposition win in Liberia? So the opposition party in Liberia, the opposition candidate Joseph Boakai has just won the elections. Remember, in Africa, it's very hard for an opposition candidate to win elections in Africa. So what basically that is what does it teach? And I think the fundamental thing is that incumbent president that is incumbent president George Weah, he was a former prolific footballer. He was one of World Footballer of the Year. So the prolific former footballer, the incumbent president George Weah, called his nemesis, his opposition candidate Joseph Boakai, to congratulate him about their win. So that is basically a win for opposition in Africa, because remember, in Africa it's very hard for an opposition candidate to win an election in Africa, very much because you have the incumbent president. They choose the electoral referee, they choose the electoral referee, they choose they have the courts siding with them, they have the courts siding with them, they have the police, they have the army. So basically, in Africa, for you to beat an incumbent president, you have basically to beat them by millions of votes. It's very different. Like in America. In America, it is the incumbent president who was complaining that he was rigged out of the election. It is Donald Trump who was complaining that he was rigged out of the election. But in Africa, it's usually the opposition candidate who usually complains that they have been rigged out of the election. But I think in America it's the opposite. It is Donald Trump who says in 2020 election he was rigged out. So basically, I think this adds momentum to the opposition parties in Africa, that they if they play along, they can win elections. And I think that's a very good that's very good for democracy in Africa, because there have been a series of coups in a number of African countries. There was a coup, military coup in Mali, there was a military coup in Burkina Faso, there was a military coup in Guinea, there was a military coup in Niger, there was a military coup in Gabon. So you can imagine, in those countries there are military coups. So basically, when you get an African country where basically there has been a clean opposition win and the incumbent president accepts the election, and then you can be sure that that is progress for democracy in Africa. And I think you had the U.S. State Department congratulating Liberia for a peaceful election. You had them also congratulating George Weah for accepting the electoral results, because remember, in Africa, winning is one thing, but for the losing candidate to accept the electoral results, especially if the losing candidate is the incumbent president, it's a very hard thing. But it has not been all gloom for Africa. It has not been all doom and gloom for Africa. You had in 2015, now retired President Muhammadu Buhari. He beat the incumbent president Goodluck Jonathan. Then you had in 2016 the now retiring president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, beat the incumbent president John Mahama. Then you had in neighboring Gambia, the opposition candidate Adama Barrow beat the 21-year running dictator Yahya Jammeh. Then I think in Malawi in 2020, the opposition candidate Lazarus Chakwera beat the incumbent president Peter Mutharika. Then in 2021, you had the opposition candidate Hakainde Hichilema beating the incumbent president that is Edgar Lungu. And now you have another opposition win, where the opposition candidate in Liberia, Joseph Boakai, has beaten the incumbent president George Weah. So you can see that very much the opposition candidates in Africa are gaining strength. They are gaining, and I think in that case then you can see that the opposition candidate in Africa is at least trying opposition politics. But I think in America it is the other way around. It is the incumbent president it is the incumbent president Donald Trump, who complained that basically the opposition was Joe Biden had rigged the election. Basically, they said Joe Biden, that is President Donald Trump, believes that in America, basically, you don't, Democrats don't win unless they cheat. That is, Democrats don't win unless they cheat. So that is the sentiment of Donald Trump. So that's it for Africa perspective. And then in the Making America, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in the polls. In America, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in the polls. So what does it mean? So is Joe Biden going to become a one-term president? Is Joe Biden going to become a one-term president? So you have Joe Biden. Many are concerned about his age. Basically, some say he is too old to be president. Some are wondering whether he is in good states to still be the commander-in-chief. Of course, I think someone defended him. He is saying that he wakes up early, he reads the papers. But of course, not many Americans, only 25% of Americans believe that President Biden has the stamina to tackle the deepest issues that plague America. So you have others believing that maybe Joe Biden is not the best person, but of course Donald Trump is just 3 years younger. Donald Trump is just 3 years younger than Joe Biden, but a lot of Americans believe that he is in good health. And I think in the polls, Trump is leading Biden by about 4 or 5 points, especially in the key battleground states. So what is happening to Joe Biden? I think Trump has a cult-like following. I think for President Trump, he has former President Trump has a cult-like following. The energy in Trump's camp is just so palpable. The energy in Donald Trump's camp is just so effusive. The energy is wide-ranging, and I think for Donald Trump, then I think maybe the energy within his camp is just so widespread that I think it boils over. But then we are going to it. But of course, polls do change. There are a million factors that could affect the outcome of polls, and I think it is 1 year to the general election. I think it is exactly 1 year, maybe even 11 months to the general election, and so we are going to see whether the courts, the cases, Donald Trump has been charged with 91 felony counts. That is, Donald Trump has been charged with 91 felony counts. So we are going to see whether those will have any bearing, whether those charges will have criminal charges will have any bearing on the prospect on how Donald Trump does perform. So we will wait to see whether those charges will have any bearing on the support that Donald Trump has. So that's it for Making America. I've been looking at the lead by Donald Trump over Joe Biden in the just recently released opinion polls. But it is about 4 pollsters who all indicated that Biden was trailing Donald Trump. And then in ideas, I'm looking at the fastest growing job in America right now. That is the diversity and inclusion officer. In ideas, I'm looking at the fastest growing job in America right now, and that is the diversity and inclusion officer. So what does this job entail? I think it's about mainstreaming minority voices, especially Black and Hispanic voices in American mainstream institutions, because I think you have the Harvard Chief Diversity Officer. Saying that basically, she wants to work herself out of a job. That is, she wants diversity to be so mainstream at Harvard that you will have. She wants diversity to be so mainstream at Harvard that you will have minorities. There will be no question as to the place of minorities at Harvard. There will be no question as to the place of minorities at Harvard. But then someone will ask, then isn't the solution to low numbers of maybe blacks or minorities in American mainstream institutions? Isn't the solution to that then in maybe improving the feeder school system to elite American universities, or maybe improving the feeder school college system, maybe historically black colleges like Howard and Morehouse, maybe to companies like Google, companies like Microsoft, companies like Amazon. This is the solution lying in maybe improving black colleges, black schools, so that they can blacks can paint their own empty canvas. And I think someone on the tech website, techcrunch.com, the startup website, techcrunch.com, said that the next chapter in the civil rights movement is in availing a business capital to African Americans or to people of color. So maybe instead of blacks being a footnote instead of minorities being a footnote in maybe white spaces, they could paint their own empty canvas. And basically that will studies show that if there was adequate business capital availing, if there was adequate business capital availing to black founders, then basically the American economy could improve by about 4 or 5 percentage points. So you can be sure that maybe the solution to this fastest growing job in America right now, that is the diversity and inclusion officer, and maybe the solution to that is in improving the feeder college system, and of course then also availing business capital. You look at Asian Americans, they have created a parallel state of upper middle class careers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, coders, computer scientists, dentists, basically. This is the parallel state that has been created by Asian Americans. They are these top-notch careers, and of course small business owners. So you can be sure Asian Americans created their own parallel system, but for African Americans, I think maybe the Democratic Party has taken African Americans for a ride. So I guess that has to change. African Americans maybe have to create also their own parallel state. And you had people like Booker T. Washington, who emphasized that blacks needed an education, they needed entrepreneurship, and that he founded the Tuskegee College, that is an agricultural college, that is Booker T. Washington, of course. I don't think he holds a lot of prominence in black American circles, but I think he really wanted African Americans to get a good education and of course start their own entrepreneurship businesses, and I think in that way then they could have created their own parallel states, because you have the Democratic Party. I think it is like the NGO in Africa. It is promising African Americans that basically it will they promise change, but then they use only that as a bait for getting votes. But once they are elected, they do nothing once they are in office. So that's ideas for now. And then in Heart and Soul, it is Thanksgiving in America. In Heart and Soul, it is Thanksgiving in America. So how do we have a heart of gratitude? For most of us, we do complain that maybe God has not done for us this and such a thing, and so we do really, for most of us, we do complain. But I think if we had a heart of gratitude, then we would thank God for all the things that He has done for us, and I think in that case, then we will be grateful. And I think if we are grateful even for the small things, the fact that we have woken up in good health, the fact that we have woken up in good health, the fact that we have friends that listen to us, we have a family that listens to us, that accommodates us, that is enough. And the fact that we have a roof over our head, that is enough to basically make us have to be, that is enough to make us to be basically, and that's enough to make us be thankful to God. So how do we have a heart of gratitude? So that has been Mabina TV. For now, we are in Africa Perspectives. I'm still looking at the opposition win in Liberia and what it means for the opposition movement in Africa in making America. Donald Trump now leads Joe Biden by about 6%, by about 4 percentage points. So what does that mean? Will Trump sustain that going into the general election next year, that is just a year away? And then in ideas, I'm looking at the fastest growing job in America right now, that is the diversity and inclusion officer. And then in Heart and Soul, I'm looking at Thanksgiving and how do we have a heart of gratitude. So that's it for now. And this has been Mabinda TV for now. This is home of compassionate conservatism in which you advocate for a fine balance, a sweet spot between individual creative genius excellence as supported by capitalism and society excellence as supported by equality of opportunity. So in essence, we are calling for capitalism with a human first, that is capitalism with a human first.